So notice this nice morph that I've achieved here just by inserting a shape tween from the circle to the square. And you also notice that there's a color change happening there, and it's actually moving position. In fact, if I go over here, select this, move it over even further, you can see that that becomes part of it. But just to emphasize, you would never make a shape tween just to move a square from one side of the screen. In fact, this takes us up to some more questions for the midterm. If you want to animate an object's position, color, size, and so on, that object should be a symbol, and you should animate it with a classic tween. Because this type of tweening uses much more computer resources, you should never use that's what we just learned about, shape tween, unless you need the object to morph in a way that is not possible with a symbol. So this you just spent a lot of time learning about. This we're going to brush over. Some people may hardly use any of this in their final animation, and I'll show you an example of someone who used quite a bit and actually did it in a very innovative way. And this is worth mentioning just because I've seen people run into problems with this. Other objects that use up a lot of computer resources, much like the shape tweens do, and may cause problems, include overusing gradients and bitmap images such as JPEGs, PNGs, and GIFs. So Flash is not that program that you want to have a lot of photorealistic stuff. Keep in mind it is a vector-based program, meaning it's more like Illustrator. If you want to do a lot of stuff with images and things like that, then the program that you might be looking for would be Adobe's After Effects. And the big difference is there, you do all your stuff and then you render it out, which is the equivalent of our command return, but rendering out a short video, even something that's like 40-50 seconds long, could take like 45 minutes because it does a whole bunch of crunching and compressing and such. But Flash or Animate is really the industry standard for vector graphics, simple, not necessarily simple, but animations that tend to not use a whole lot of computer resources. And I'm not saying that you can't have an image in your animation, because we have one here. I've made ones where I've had as many as like 50, 60, 100 images in them, but they were small. They were only like 800 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall. Same thing with gradients. You can use it to a certain effect if you want something, to gradate between green and red along its edge, or you want it to look like it has a shadow on it so it gets darker as it goes. You can use that, but if you start overloading, like a 30-second project and everything, your background, all the images that are moving, and especially shape tweening, things like that, if they're all have gradients on it, it's probably going to overload the system to the point that when you do command return, you'll be waiting a long time to see the results, and it may get kind of frustrating. Now, shape tweening has improved greatly over the years, but there's still certain things that it's not so good at. Let me see if I can get an example. I'm just going to try a few things with the eraser tool. Maybe just cut down there and then scrub through. And you can see that's a little weird, right? It actually disappears before it comes back together. Now there is a feature in here that you can apply hints to an object and it will try to do a better job with it. I'll show you something in just a second that you can alter or modify with shape hints. But something like this, you might think, oh, I could place these shape hints and get this one to work. And the truth is, no matter how much you do, you probably won't. The reason is you're going from two shapes. Now, these are really two independent shapes, and you're trying to change it into one. And the way the hints work is you place something on the first keyframe. So let's say I placed a shape hint here. I would say I want that to represent what's going to happen over here. So I might place it there. But you can see that those two stay roughly similar the whole time. So a shape hint is not going to help us. So here's where you would probably have to use even more computer resources and do a little bit of frame by frame from about here to here. So I'm just going to show you like one example that you could probably do is go to about right here and then place a perfect circle. In fact, I'm going to back up enough steps to where before I took that chunk out of the one that I erased. Okay, so then what I would suggest doing is just making a copy of this. So I'm going to option drag that to about right here. Then go back here and take your chunk out with the eraser. So there's your starting state. Now that doesn't do a good job. This part does. So I'd probably come in here and remove the tween. Control, remove tween. Now if this was just playing really quickly, that might be enough. You know, kind of fills in as it's going. But if it's not quite enough for you, go somewhere in between here, or you could go every step in between. Do a F6, take out your trusty brush tool, and start painting a little bit back in, and then paint a little bit more in, just like you did on the first project. I've done a shape tween that goes from an L shape that I made here to a perfect square over here. If I come back here, click the playhead, you can see it does a pretty good job, but I get, you know, what I consider to be a little bit of an anomaly right in there, and also it's curling up there. So say my vision was to keep this corner perfectly square the whole time and to have this edge right here grow out into that circle. So this is where shape hints can come in handy. So what you do is you click the first frame that you're interested in. It's always going to go between the first keyframe that you're working on and the last keyframe that you're working on. You start the hints here, you finish the hints here. So we go to the first one, we go insert, we go to, actually I'm sorry, it's modify, shape, and then add shape hint. And if you're going to be doing a lot of this, you might want to learn the shortcut. And then you place that hint where you want it here, and then you go over into the last frame, and you can see that that hint is right there, and I'm going to drag it, and it turns green when we know that it's been positioned. And now if we scrub the playhead, you can see that that has cured what was ailing the bottom corner. Now let's see if we can fix this inside corner. So once again, we'll go up to modify, shape, add shape hint, and you can see right below that was the option to remove all shape hints. So if they went bad on you or something like that, go to this last one. And a general rule of thumb on this is that you want your shape hints to be continuous. So it wouldn't be wise to put like A here and then B, or say like D here, you know. So but in this case I'm only going to need two, so it's really not going to matter, but a nice fluid rounding with them is nice. And yeah, that's doing exactly what I envisioned. The corner just kind of builds itself out. So they can be very handy, but they can't work miracles. So keep in mind, when it comes to shape tweening, you may have to do several things to make it work. One is add shape hints. If that works for you, consider yourself lucky, or consider yourself real lucky if you don't even have to do that. If you have an area that's really tough, find a way to break it in half and get to the midway point, like I did in the earlier example where, in case mine wasn't quite a midway point, it was over here where I went from the broken circle to the completed circle before it went from the circle to the square. Another thing is, anytime it helps, break it up onto different layers. And let me show you a great example of someone that did that. In this student project right here, you see this hair that looks beautifully flowing. What she actually did to create that was, like, this chunk of hair, for example, was on one layer. This was on another layer. This was on another layer. She had somewhere between, I can't remember now, but it was like 5 and 8 layers to pull this hair off. So for Flash to try to do a shape tween with this whole entire area, way more than it can handle. But if you give it just a little piece and you say, okay, I want you to shape tween from this to, maybe a little bit longer, and the tip to change from rounded to pointed, it can probably handle that. So what she did was just made sure that this, let's say she started with this animation here. Then when she made this one, she made sure it was just a little bit bigger, so that it actually sat over the top of this one. And then when she came in and did this one, same thing again, made sure it was just a little bit bigger, so that when everything's working, we, the viewer, have no idea that that was 8 different layers. Let's see if we can't do something that'll look familiar from back to day one and make it a little simplified with shape tweening and symbols. But we'll start with the shape tween. So let's make our snail, and let's make it, just about as soon as this thing kind of gets out of our way. So about right there. So I'll create another layer and do a F7 right there, rename the layer. So I drew out my inchworm. Gonna go a pretty good guess here. I don't know, inchworms are slow, maybe a little more than a second later. Gonna do a F7 here, but I'm gonna turn on my onion skinning so that I can stretch this back far enough to get a good view of the worm. And then maybe zoom in a little bit too, and then draw him. And I want to draw him like he's on a treadmill, which may sound kind of ridiculous, but I don't want him moving. So if you imagine what an inchworm would look like on a treadmill, it's probably just going to come in from the front and from the back. I'm not really sure actually, because I've never seen one on a treadmill, but I'm guessing that's probably okay. Then let's go ahead, put our shape tween in there. Yeah, that looks to me exactly like a inchworm on a treadmill. Okay, so now we realize that there's some value to that. I'm going to go ahead and trim this down, Shift F5, and then I want to turn this into a symbol, so that since I've got that treadmill look going on, I can just go ahead and bring that out onto the stage as a symbol. And remember, the steps to doing that is I highly suggest you go ahead and do a save, and then all we need to do is select this, that, right click, cut frames, create a symbol from scratch, Command F8, make that a graphic, click OK. We're now inside the symbol, and right click, and whoops, what did I do there? A right click and a paste frames. Okay, so there we go. Oh, I can't see that. Let's double click on the hand tool. Okay, I did Command minus to back up far enough, and we can see that this is now here as a symbol. Go back to the main timeline. Go back to where I wanted this, somewhere right about in here. Do F7 to give me a blank keyframe. Go into the library and bring an instance of that little guy out here. And we'll go ahead and position it down near the bottom of the stage. And then now it's just going to keep repeating that up and down motion. And what I want to do is create a tween in which we'll make it move across the stage. Now, how fast, how far over, who knows until we try it, right? But I'll just place an F6 right here, move it over. This is probably going to be way too fast. But let's go ahead and put a, now it's back to a classic tween, so you can't get confused here. The symbol itself contains animation, which is a shape tween, but we're creating a classic tween on the stage because we are tweening a symbol. Now, if that didn't make sense, back that up, listen to that again. But here we go. There's a worm moving across here, and I got a feeling that's going to be too fast of a worm. And indeed it is. So I'll click and drag to stretch this out. And now if I preview that, not bad. It still looks like he's sliding. So that